Hello and welcome to In the Classroom, an educational podcast making teaching and learning more transparent. My name is Benjamin Stewart at benjaminlstewart.org, and today is December 12th, 2021. Today's topic, writing a thesis, will cover some general ideas and some things to consider when writing a thesis paper, when developing a literature review, and then later conducting one's own research. Before we get into today's topic, if you have any insights or thoughts on the matter, feel free to reach out to me at my Twitter handle at BNLEEZ. So today's discussion, I want to spend a few minutes talking about writing a thesis paper. I'm specifically thinking about students who are in a BA program in English language teaching who are completing or who will complete an academic writing course that allows them to develop a 2,500-word literature review in preparation for later conducting their own research. Now, one thing that I always encourage students to do when they're in the process of thinking and writing about a literature review, as they're trying to build a theoretical framework that later will support their own research, is to take a few things into consideration at the time of their writing and their thinking process. Today, I want to talk about a few areas that I suggest to students to think about when developing a literature review. And the first is to think about the problem. Now, I would probably say that this is a very important mental exercise, something to consider when writing basically any kind of academic essay. When you're asked to write a 5-paragraph essay, it's always good to have an idea about a problem that you're developing in that first introduction paragraph. This automatically gives your writing some significance, gives it purpose, gives it a reason for why the target audience would want to read your text. So instead of always thinking about this as an academic exercise, writing for a particular instructor, the idea is to develop a writing text or written text that is more realistic, that's something that would, again, benefit a person in real life. So think about a problem, and in this particular case, when you're thinking about writing a thesis that involves doing research, we're thinking about a problem that you might relate to as an English language learner. Maybe you're already teaching, and it's a problem that you relate to as an instructor. So begin there. Think about what this problem, what it looks like, when does it happen, who are the actors involved, who's involved in this problem. Is the problem more relevant to instructors? Is the problem more related to the actual English language learner, or perhaps someone else? And usually it's a combination of things, but try to ask yourself that question. Who are the participants involved in that particular, that relate to that particular problem? Now, the second thing I would think about when you're thinking about a problem for your thesis papers, also to make sure that you can find other researchers, other research out there in the literature that also addresses the same problem. This is very important. So it's not just finding a problem that's relevant to you, the researcher, but also looking at how others looking at how they've written about the problem. What do they have to say about the problem? How have they addressed that same problem? So this is also a very important key aspect that needs to be done early on in the process. And this is one of the most challenging things that I've faced with learners. One of the hardest things to do is to really find that problem and be able to articulate that problem. Now, later when you develop your literature review, you'll need to have included that problem in the introduction paragraph. But the idea here is to come up with a problem that you can write about in the theory that also will be relevant later on when you're doing your own research. So two things. Make sure that the problem is relevant to you as an English language learner and or instructor. And number two, that the problem exists, that it's out there in the literature, it's well researched, and you're able to find that research that relates to the problem. Now, I mentioned target audience. The second thing to consider when you're writing a thesis statement is to really zero in on who would benefit the most having read your thesis paper. Are you writing to beginning teachers? Are you writing to administrators? Are you writing your paper to parents of English language learners? Ask yourself that question, and always keep in mind who is the target audience of your thesis paper. The third thing I would consider when you're writing your literature review is actually the participants that might participate in your research. Now, in our particular context, I'm speaking primarily to 7th semester students who are taking an academic writing class, who are developing a 2,500-word literature review. The class itself doesn't include the research project. It only includes developing the theory. So sometimes it's difficult to foresee who the participants might be in your research. But I always encourage students, even though research is not part of the class itself, the next semester, the 8th semester, where you will be asked to complete the research project, a lot of times it's helpful to go ahead and begin thinking about the participants and reaching out to different schools and teachers to get a feel for who might be good candidates for participating in your research. So it's really never too early to begin reaching out to administrators or coordinators and asking them, next semester during these dates, is it possible for me to do my research? And start to reach out to them so that you can have an idea about availability. You can have an idea about which participants would likely participate in your study, because again, this informs it really informs everything. It informs the target audience, the problem. It really relates to what you want to focus on. You're going to focus on children. Are you going to focus on young adults, maybe at the university? Are you going to focus on maybe administrators? A lot of these questions about participants can be answered if you can reach out to them and find out if they are able to help you. Now, sometimes what happens is I see students who are really pursuing great topics, great ideas. They want to pursue something related to, let's say, language disabilities or learning disabilities, but they're not able to find students or participants for those particular learning disabilities that they're looking for. And this is oftentimes a good example of having a good topic, but not having the resources, the people available to actually conduct your research. So you don't want to begin a project and write a 2,500-word literature review on a topic that later isn't possible, that you're not going to be able to actually conduct because you weren't able to find those participants. So reach out to the schools, reach out to the departments. Right? Be thinking about what you want the kind of data that you would likely collect. How would you collect it? How long would you need to collect this information? Perhaps even what kind of permissions you would need. Again, it's never too early to begin reaching out and thinking about these questions and trying to find answers to questions as you're developing your literature review. The next topic to think about when you're looking at and developing your literature review, and one of the hardest things also to do, is to narrow down your topic. Now, for our purposes, since we are participating in BA program in English language teaching, we ask students to focus on applied linguistics. And so when you're narrowing down your topic, I have a list here that I'm going to provide you that you can think about. What do you want to focus on in your research? What would be your language focus? maybe what would be your overall educational focus, and try to find ways to combine some of these ideas. So thinking first in terms of language, applied linguistics. Well, we can think about listening, speaking, reading and writing, grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation. Typically, these are the general domains that we can think about, and we can focus on one of these items, one of these areas. Maybe we just want to focus on listening comprehension. Maybe we just want to focus on reading, or perhaps a combination of these. But what I suggest that you not do is to choose too many of these. Like if we focus on listening, speaking, reading, and writing, that would be too broad. That would be too general for most types of theses that you're writing. So you want to narrow it down. Maybe you just want to focus on grammar, overt versus covert grammar, or implicit versus explicit grammar, for example. Maybe something related to vocabulary or the lexical approach. You just want to focus on vocabulary and so on. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is to also think about a general category like material design, cognition, culture, some kind of social learning or interactional patterns, working either individually, in pairs, in groups, small groups. Maybe you want to focus on listening strategies, teaching techniques, critical thinking, technology. So again, these are very general categories, and the idea is to think about a combination of these ideas that might help you narrow down your topic. Now, there are other concepts, of course, that you might consider that aren't listed here, but what I want to suggest to you is to find ways to combine some of these. Maybe you want to focus on speaking and social learning or interactional patterns and how students are helping and working through a particular task in small groups, practicing their speaking skill. Maybe you want to add another component, maybe looking at certain vocabulary techniques that they're using or strategies to promote vocabulary learning, students working in small groups, and you want to collect data from students to be able to analyze and understand how they are interacting, practicing the speaking skill, or maybe you want to focus on vocabulary or grammar. Right, so what I'm trying to do here is to combine some of these items, some of these key concepts, as I'm trying to narrow down a topic. All right, so these are some key ideas here, trying to first come up with a problem, consider your target audience, figure out who the participants could be for your topic. Of course, narrowing down your topic, looking at both the language aspect of it, applied linguistics, and also a more general type of general education or general approaches that I mentioned here today. Bringing all of those together, everything influences everything else. The participants that you're able to find will help you narrow down your topic and figure out which applied linguistics or which focus on language or general education that you focus on, right? It's very much related to the problem. What's the general problem? Is it a problem with teaching techniques? Is it a problem with students? And so on. Okay, so I hope this helps. Think about how you're going to collect your data, how you're going to conduct your research. Try to do that as best you can while you're developing your literature review. If you're in a position where you've already completed your literature review, know that when you begin your research project, you'll have 4 to 5 weeks to make any modifications as you need to make sure that your literature review aligns with your research. You don't want to develop a literature review, obviously, that doesn't have anything to do with your own particular research efforts. Think of your thesis statement as the overall one-sentence general idea of your entire paper, but remember that the thesis statement relates not only to the theory, not only your literature review, but your thesis statement also relates, obviously, to your own research. This has been In the Classroom, an educational podcast, making teaching and learning more transparent. Thanks for listening.